Welcome, everyone, to another podcast. And I don't know if anybody recognizes this gentleman here, but he's actually from the Martha and the Muffins group that rose in the 80s with the song Echo Beach. And we're going to talk about his new album, Garden Music, which is a first solo album. Uh, Emerging from decades of sonic cultivation, Mark Gain, the visionary co founder of the group in the 80s, and architect of the indelible Echo Beach, presents his first solo album, Garden Music. Released this spring, there's no conventional pop offering, but a profound, deeply intuitive exploration. It's an instrumental landscape, meticulously grown from the seeds of plant names and the fertile soil of imagined inner worlds. That's amazing. A sprawling ambient meditation on memory, nature, and the very essence of sound itself, harvested from over 50 years of collected audio fragments. Forget the chart hits. Prepare to wander through an entirely different, richly textured sonic ecosystem. I love that already. Conceived years ago at the suggestion of his partner, Martha Johnson, Garden Music represents a fusion of Gaines' lifelong passions music, painting, and gardening. Each of the 11 pieces bearing evocative plant titles like Feverfew and Love Lies Bleeding defies genre, blossoming from an archive of studio experiments, field recordings, and haunting found sounds. Wow.
That's a mouthful.
A late night phone call, a vintage Valentine, a chopped up interview, but almost entirely on intuition rather than calculation. Resurrected during pandemic isolation and deliberately shielded from the rush of promotion, the album is Gaines' quiet, potent testament to patience, the subconscious, and finding profound artistry in the hum of life's quiet corners, and invites listeners to lie down in dark and disappear into its otherworldly beauty. And I love the music. It's awesome. I love it. Thank you so much for being here, Mark.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you've enjoyed it because it is quite a ride, and it is quite outside pop music, which everybody associates me with being, with the band and everything. But my experience with experimental music goes further back than the band Martha and the Muffins. So it's been a long timeline, and it's been something that's been part of me for many, many decades now.
Yeah, you describe garden music as stemming from the question if plants were people, what would their lives sound like? Can you walk us through the moment that question truly took root and how it began to manifest sonically in those early stages?
Well, I have to go right back to the beginning where once I decided I was going to do something about gardening, I did compile about 30 common plant names because they're always so evocative and colorful, and out of that picked about 11 or 12. And as I started working, that question didn't come up immediately. I just thought, okay, so what kind of music would these names attach themselves to? And as I started working, it seemed like they became more and more like personalities. And that became sort of an idea that I started working around. And so, I would have a title like Creeping Charlie, and going, okay, so what's Creeping Charlie all about? And I would just work intuitively, and I did go into my very, very extensive sound library, which I've been accumulating for many, many decades. Like, as soon as cassette recorders came out that were actually half decent, I'd be out in fields recording wind and bees and crickets and stuff, without any idea that I would ever use them. I just liked going out there and collecting sounds. So when it came to this project, I started delving into those and going, okay, so do I have something in here that might sound like Creeping Charlie or Feverfew or Love Lies Bleeding? And sure enough, there was stuff in there that I could use almost as a bed track, and then start adding and developing it around. And then, as I say, the personality thing started happening later, and I went, okay, I've got Creeping Charlie. What's he up to? You know, there's this strange nocturnal landscape. Is it all going on inside his head? Or is it actually more narrative? Is it some creepy guy on his way to axe murder somebody in the nighttime? Who knows? You know, and I mean, that might have been my idea, but it wasn't like a definite idea. I just thought, well, these could be one or two of many interpretations. So I'm always interested in hearing what other people think is happening, because it's all open-ended. But anyway, that was a bit of my working mythology there.
Yeah, you emphasize the album was created almost entirely intuitively, letting pieces evolve from archived sounds. How did you navigate the tension between this intuitive flow and the overarching conceptual framework of representing specific plants or inner worlds?
Well, intuition leads you to a lot of places that conscious thought. I mean, if I'd overthought it, I might have got lost, and it might have become too didactic or too obvious. And I think that the main overarching quality of, like, the whole structure was more about how to sequence all the pieces once they were done, because they're all very different. And because of that, like, if you have the CD, and maybe I will release an LP at some point, I deliberately left a longer space, a longer pause between the tracks, because you're coming out of something like B-Bomb and going into something calmer and less grandiose, and you need time to sort of sonically readjust. So when it came to figuring out what was going to begin this album, what was going to end it, I thought I have to have kind of a way of allowing people to travel through it, and it needed a definite beginning. And I thought that Blue Mist was a great opening track, because you have the voice of Delia Derbyshire, who was the great pioneering electronics wizard at the radiophonic workshop at the BBC during the 60s. And she did the arrangement of the original Doctor Who theme. She was brilliant. But so I heard this interview with her, and I chopped up all the pieces that I really like. And she is in a way that she's almost introducing the rest of the record, right? She's saying, "Oh, sound, beautiful sound," and that seemed like a really good beginning. And then Love Lies Bleeding, which is the most conventional song structure at the very end, seemed like a great ending, because it's almost a requiem for, you know, either honeybees, which are in big trouble now, or it might have been the name of some of a person that you had a relationship that's over. Like, it's kind of ambiguous, but it kind of has a elegiac ending to it, which seemed like an end. So then the work was what to put in sequence in between those two bookends. I don't know if I answered your question that well, but
Yeah, I agree with that. Exactly. Well, I was listening to the music, and I like human voices appear unexpectedly throughout the album. Delia Derbyshire, Your Mother's Valentine, A Phone Call. What did this persistent, almost ghostly emergence of the human voice add to this primarily instrumental, nature-inspired work that surprised even you?
well, that was another surprise, is that I never intended to use a lot of voices, but as I traveled along in the making of this, I found that I was either going to things that I'd recorded or inventing voices, and that again sort of fed into the personification. I think it might be every track except Baby's Breath actually has a voice or something that sounds like a voice. And that again was accidental. It wasn't pre-planned. And then I suddenly realized at some point during the whole project, wow, everything's got a voice on here. But in some cases, they're real voices. On something like Deadly Nightshade, that voice is entirely created. It's not a real voice. And the voices you hear in it, I think I got something off the internet of a guy trying to coax his parrot out from under the furniture because he had to take him to the vet, and the parrot's going, I don't want to do that. But I took that parrot voice and made that into like this weird, ominous background voice in there somewhere. And you think he's saying something, but you can't quite tell what it is, partially because it's a parrot and partially because he's not really saying anything. So, there was a lot of stuff like that going on as well.
Yeah, that's true. Um, so Love Lies Bleeding features the album's only sung lyric, which is interesting. Why did the specific plant demand words, and what significance does that stark, poignant line, "Honey bee, you're gone for good," hold within the context of the entire garden?
Well, perhaps, and this was probably subconscious on my part, but as I said earlier, it sort of it's almost like an elegy and a very sense of loss and yearning. But somehow it seemed that actual bed track I've had probably since the late 90s and without all the other stuff on it. And somehow when I heard that again, I just thought, this is the perfect thing for the end song, and somehow it just came together. I wasn't going, oh, this is going to be the only song where this is sung lyric. I tried these lyrics out. I think I had them for maybe another song, and I went, but these lyrics work for this song, and I didn't think too hard about it. I think one of the ways that creating works is that if you do start thinking too hard about things, you kind of get bogged down. And for me, and especially with this project, I just went with the flow. I found the bed tracks, and it was called Love Lies Bleeding for decades. I think it was what was going to be a Martha and the Muffins song and never ended up on an album or anything. And so its time had come. It was time to put it on this album. And I think I had those lyrics kicking around for another song idea, and they just seemed to go together really well.
Yeah, it did. But Mark, with decades of sounds archived, how did you begin the process of selection and transformation? Was it like finding seeds, or were you pruning an overgrown sonic space?
Well, it was maybe more like, being on the beach and looking for shells and rocks, and you're kind of digging about, and you go, oh, this is a cool rock, we'll put it beside this shell and see what happens. And it was kind of like that. I'm lucky that I had this whole archive, because in fact, most of the album was found, at least initially, with what you would call the bed tracks for these pieces. Most of it was found from this, field recordings, all the stuff in my sonic archive. And so, in a sense, that made it easy. But the process, as you say, it was like kind of rooting about. Rooting about, like maybe the opposite of weeding the garden. You're actually looking for good stuff to dig up,
Yeah.
or the beach. You were putting things together, and so it was a process where you might put two things together and they didn't work out. So you dump that and go, okay, let's try this, and it would work. And I think, given the fact that I've been doing this kind of music one way or another for so many decades, I think I have a good idea of when to stop, because you can go too far on things. I mean, it's like that with ordinary, like conventional songwriting as well. You can, kind of make a song overripe, and then you go, well, that's not really what the initial idea or inspiration was, and now I've wrecked it. But I think, I was pretty disciplined on this, and even though there's a lot of organic richness, and there's a lot to listen to, and I'm hoping that people that want to listen to it more than once will maybe a year or 5 years later go, oh, I never heard that sound before. So I'm putting a lot in there, but hopefully not overdoing it.
Talking about not overdoing it though, but I know like your album just stayed for years, like was set aside, resurrected during COVID, and then sat for 2 more years. How did that immense span of time and the periods of necessary distance fundamentally shape the final work?
Well, it's interesting because say I'd done it, uh, 2 decades and plus, and finished it all at once, it probably would have had a different quality. And so, it would get shelved a lot for long periods of time. Then I would dig it out and go, oh, this is really great. I love this. I really ought to start working on it again. And I'd add a little bit, and then it would get shelved.
Yeah.
And I think over the long process, when I hadn't listened to these things for a long time, I could go back and be more objective about it. When you're working and doing an album on a fast or tight timeline, it's a whole other quality, and it's not necessarily better or worse. But because this was so long, I could go back and go, yeah, this isn't working. I'm going to try putting it in this direction. And so it gave me the luxury of kind of being more distant from it, and maybe in a sense dispassionate about it. Maybe not, maybe that's the wrong word, but it allowed me to look at it more from a distance, and because of the long timeline, and maybe make decisions based on that sort of that kind of distant looking back at it, instead of being like it right up front and going, oh, we got a week to go, I'm just going to throw this stuff in and we'll be done. It wasn't like that.
Yeah, good job, by the way. You did a good job. But I like how you directly compare finishing the album to gardening. It's like meditative, grounded, outside of time. How did the physical act of gardening influence the pace, structure, or aesthetic of the music?
Well, I think when you're interested in a lot of things, and a lot of artists have many interests. When you study like some of the major composers of the 20th century, inevitably they were also painters, or they were gardeners or whatever. And so the parameters and inspirations that come from gardening also apply to a music project, and it's all very zen. When you're in the garden, and when I'm painting and when I'm working on this kind of music particularly, there's a very zen quality to it, because you're kind of concentrating on a deep level, but you're also sort of outside of yourself, which has a very grounding and calming effect, which is one of the big reasons I like to garden anyway, because it's a really good way of sort of shedding all the angst of the modern world and getting somewhere deeper within yourself. And so the gardening informed the music. I wouldn't say the music informs the gardening that much. It was more like the gardening as a subconscious activity fed into the project, but not necessarily in a very obvious or conscious way. And yet it's there. I wouldn't deny that at all.
Yeah. You actively chose the garden over building a website or engaging the promotional machine. Now, what does that reluctance reveal about your relationship to the music industry now, like compared to the Martha and the Muffins era? And what value does that quiet resistance hold for the work itself?
Well, I mean, it's probably the attitude I've had for a long time, that I'd rather, it's hard for me to be in front of a computer, and there's a lot of jobs as a creator. I love making music, and I think a lot of music creators would say this. I didn't get into this to do social media. I did it to make music, and I love making music. And now that most of the work, if you're not signed to a big label, is on you, I find I have to take on, as many of us creators do, whether you're a writer or a musician or whatever, you got to go, okay, now I'm going to have a website. Now I got to learn how to do all this. And now I have to go on social media. And all of this takes away from your creative work. And I do find that a challenge. We've got a lot of challenges now, but just trying to find the mental space to get out of that. So I'm more inclined to put that off. I'll go, yeah, it's a beautiful day. It's summertime. I'm going to go, I'll just spend 5 minutes, weeding, but then 5 minutes turns into 2 hours, and it's much more pleasurable. Maybe one of the reasons why this took so long. I just, it's fun working on the music, and it was just as fun going out in the garden and doing something there. But I don't know. It's a hard challenge for me to have to do all this work, and I think I've heard a lot of musicians say the same thing. Now, back in the day, of course, you had the record company doing a lot of that work, most of it actually, but at the same time, they were completely ripping you off. Although the rip-offs continue in different ways now, like streaming and stuff. Like no artist is under the top 1% are making any money at all at that. It's a bit of a scam, but some things maybe never change.
Yeah, that's true. As a visual artist, Mark, how did your painting practice inform the textures, colors, or spatial qualities we hear in garden music? Is there a specific painting technique that finds a parallel in your sonic layering?
Yeah, I think it all comes from the same deep source, actually. And again, when you ask a question like that, I have to think about it because so much of it is subliminal. But most of my paintings have always been very textural.
Mm-hmm.
And back in the 70s, early 80s, I was doing large scale abstract works that were very landscape based. Even though they were abstract, my inspiration was for landscapes. And then I'm still working on an ongoing series called Fitness Landscapes, which are not so much, they don't look so much like landscapes, but they're all based on tiny little figures on exercise machines that I kept blowing up, overpainting, so they turn into other things that I don't have any control. Like I'm not really going, I want this to turn into an angel or a cocoon or some sort of weird thing. They just do. But again, they're more subtly textured, but obviously a garden's full of textures.
Mm-hmm.
Painting, certainly in certain, when you're using thicker paint, it's very textural, it's very gestural, and all of those things do get translated for me into composing as well. Again, I don't think consciously of it, but when I'm working to build a track, maybe I am conscious of it, I'm not sure. Like I'm adding things and going, okay, does this work with this? And really that is in a large amount talking about texture. So yes, I guess I'm more conscious of it than I thought about, thanks to your question.
Yeah, it's nice to think about it. I like to go deep dive. While a solo project, you work with Ray Dillard and Graham Brown. What specific qualities or perspectives did they bring to the mixing and mastering that were essential to realizing your solitary vision?
Well, Ray Dillard is an audio genius, and he's one of the most talented people I know. He's not only is he a brilliant engineer, and he knows so much about how to record things, and he's had this stellar career traveling around the world. He's associated with the percussion group Nexus. He's a phenomenal player. He has a deep understanding of sound and musicality. And we first worked with him on Martha's solo project called Solo One. And we met him, and when we met him, we went, this is the guy we want to work with for this. And since then, we've done several things. The other thing that's great about Ray is there's no music too weird for him. He can score for, like an orchestra or a percussion group, or he can improvise, which we have done together, and do the weirdest stuff, and it's all music for him. So he's a brilliant guy to work with, and when he had a lot to do with the mixing. We mixed it together, and I would do sort of a rough mix and send it to him, and he would ask very specific questions about, okay, so what do you want to have happen here? And because of online technology now he could be at a studio in Barrie, Ontario. I could be down here in Toronto, and we'd be mixing it in real time. Mm-hmm. And we were doing, minuscule tweaks, but that's how sensitive to sound he is. He understands that if you bring something down a quarter of a dB, that can make a big difference. So he's very attuned to that. And then he was the one who recommended Graham Brown. I said, who do you think should master this? And he goes, I actually auditioned a bunch of mastering engineers, some of whom are world famous,
Wow.
and I blind tested them. And Graham's was the one I liked the best. And interestingly about Graham, he's out in Vancouver, so I've never met him in person. But one of the things that Ray told me is that he is visually limited in some way. And Ray said that is very interesting because that means possibly, and from what I can hear, he's somehow has a special attunement to sound. Now I should ask Graham directly about this, but that was Ray's theory. He said he has, no matter what I give Graham, there's something he always adds, but he also, unlike a lot of mastering engineers, if something is already good, he won't mess with it. Because there's a lot of engineers and producers out there that will take a good sound, and because you can do so, will add a bunch of plugins because, that's what you do. But Graham will go, this doesn't need anything.
Yeah.
It's fine. Or he might go, the bottom end is a bit, in this frequency is a bit too much, especially if you're cutting an LP, it's gonna. So he's very, again, like Ray, he's very finely attuned. So they were both fabulous to work with, and a lot of why this sounds good is because of those two.
Yeah. It's an interesting album. It's like I call it the genre-defying. It's like reviewers struggle to categorize it. Ambient, experimental, collage. Do genre labels matter to you for this work? Is garden music actively defining them or simply existing outside that framework?
I think it exists outside that framework because I've never been that interested in pigeonholing anything that we've done. I know, so Martha and the Muffins has been, over our 40 plus year careers, has been, labeled as a new wave band, punk funk, ambient, alternative, art pop. They all apply. And on our Instagram page, I kind of went polygenric since 1977, and I made up polygenric, but it's a mouthful and it doesn't really sound very good. But it's the only thing I could think of that would, kind of give an indication of the breadth of what we've done. And certainly the garden music, I consider it a great compliment that people don't know how to categorize it. I mean, that's fine with me. I think it's a really good thing that, I've talked to people that have kind of been speechless in trying to describe what it is. And I said, well, you don't have to, just, it just is.
So compared to the pop structures of Martha and the Muffins, which sadly, that group, we really wish that it had continued, garden music is spacious and unhurried. Was embracing this restraint and spaciousness a challenge for you, or did it feel like a natural evolution?
Well, I wouldn't say it was an evolution necessarily, because on a lot of Martha and the Muffins album cuts, we did a lot of ambience or ambient-like things, or instrumentals that had a very expansive feeling to it. And like one song that comes into mind immediately is By the Waters of Babylon, which was on our The World is a Ball album, or the last cut on Danceport, which is an instrumental called Whatever Happened to Radio Val Road. And they're very, and another one on Ice Age called 22 in Cincinnati, that was a bonus cut, but they're very expansive. So that was always a part of Martha and the Muffins. And obviously garden music takes that maybe a step further, because I wasn't concerned with conventional song structure in any case. But I think it's always been a part of the band, and certainly, because I and Martha are the main songwriters, I brought that into into garden music as well.
Yeah. Mark, can you take us inside the creation of one specific track, like Deadly Nightshade with the phone call, or Creeping Charlie? Like, what was the core sonic idea or feeling, and how did the found sounds and processing build that particularly life?
Well, let's go. Can I talk about Creeping Charlie?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, because that one has a very interesting one of your faves, perhaps, Chris. Um, that had a very the bed, the so-called bed track for that was this thing I did in the apartment I had on Bloor Street in Toronto that had a fairly large kitchen,
Mm.
and the kitchen had great acoustics, so I would do a lot of recording there, just song ideas and things. And one day, in about 82 or 83, and don't ask me why I thought of this because I can no longer tell you, but I set up some I set up some furniture in the kitchen and just started jumping over it and
Oh.
going over a rock, over a log, over a bush. And I've been exposed to a lot of performance art. I've done some of that in my early years. So I thought this is sort of like a private performance art thing. And so I turned on my tape deck. I jumped over this furniture going over a rock, over a log, over a bush. And I did it until I was so tired I had to stop. And when I heard that again, because that was in the sound library, I went, okay, this sounds like Creeping Charlie moving through some sort of weird landscape, right? And so that was the bed track. And then I thought, okay, if he's moving through a landscape, what else is happening? Well, he's rustling leaves. So I went out in the backyard, set up mics and grabbed, some leaves and like squeezed them together and got into that. And then from there, I have a very early modular synthesizer called a Synthi A, which was sort of the art band synthesizer. Pink Floyd, King Crimson, Roxy Music, they've all used it. And I was lucky to purchase. I was lucky to purchase the one when the art college sound lab wanted to sell it. So I've had it a long time. I would never give it up. But it's really good for making really squonky bird noises and unidentifiable insect creaky noises. So some of that went in. A lot of it also did a really good cricket noise, even though it sounds like crickets. It's really the Synthi, and sort of natural boat creaking at a dock, but it's all sunk in, so none of it's. You're not going, hey, that sounds a boat. That's a boat creaking. It's all layered, so it's just a bunch of weird stuff. And so, Creeping Charlie's going over a rock, over a log, over a bush, and as I alluded to earlier, is this sort of a scene in his own mind, or are we watching him going somewhere to do something creepy? So that gives you an idea of how that track got together.
Yeah, that's weird. That's interesting how tracks come together, right?
Those tracks like this, yeah.
Yeah. So how do the field recordings embedded within the album function? Like, are they documentary, purely textual, or carriers of specific personal memories you're trying to evoke?
Well, at different stages, they're probably all of those things. Like, they began as, almost maybe when I was recording stuff like that, looking at it more objectively, they kind of are sonic diaries in their raw form, because I can listen to that recording and go, oh yeah, that was the kitchen that we lived at, on Bloor Street, and I love that kitchen, and we made recordings, and here's a cool, and I can almost bring that back. But then it gets used, and it takes on another dimension, because then it has a use beyond just, like a sonic snapshot of something that happened at that time and place. So it gets used and utilized, and then it becomes embedded in a song, and then or a piece, and it becomes a component of that. So it turns into something else. So it has maybe several different lives.
Yeah, a lot of vibes. Look at that. Your history includes avant-garde work and collaborations. I was just thinking about Laurie Anderson the other day. She's the Superman one, the one that wrote that song Superman, and John Oswald as well. How did those experiences resurface or get transformed when working on this deeply personal garden-focused project?
Well, they're all part of my past. I mean, Laurie Anderson came up, I think, when was it? Like 78, maybe 79, and did a performance at the Art Gallery of Ontario, but she also did a talk at the Art College and recruited a bunch of us in sound studies to help her. So we all, in essence, we became her crew, and sort of set the whole thing up for her and helped her realize it. And that was a great experience. And the thing about her was that every March, the Art College would have a bus trip down to New York City in the 70s. And so we'd go down there and we'd be all exposed to this incredible stuff that was going on in New York City. So I remember first hearing about her, seeing an exhibit of hers at some gallery in Soho or somewhere. And she had used strips of 16 millimeter film as a score. And she had also done that famous putting audio tape on a violin bow and having a playback head on her violin. So it was a very early example of sampling. So she would have pre-recorded tapes and she'd be going back and forth, at different speeds, and it was phenomenal. So, and then there were things like all the video art that was going on there. And you come back with all these ideas. You go to Soundline and go, yeah, we're going to do something, We were absorbing all these influences. So, and of course, John Oswald has been doing phenomenal work for decades, like the whole plunderphonics thing. He was like way ahead of his time with that, and uniquely, he had his own unique vision with what sampling could be. And we've done improvised concerts together, and he actually played sax on what was it, Boys in the Bushes on the Dance Park album. So when we got to know him as far back as that, he played on that cut, and we see each other from time to time. And he's actually doing something really interesting tonight, which I couldn't go to, but he's always doing something great. He's a brilliant artist.
That's awesome. So I know that you recommend listening to the album in the dark, lying down. Why is this immersive, almost passive reception crucial to experience garden music as you intend?
Well, I'm old school. I'm of a certain age where when you went to Sam the Record Man, you bought your album, maybe even because the cover was great.
Yeah.
And you take it home, and if you weren't being bugged by your younger siblings, you would lie on the sofa, you would turn the lights down, you might smoke a bit of dope or you might not. And it allowed you to just get into that world. I mean, that's what listening to albums was all about back then. And so with garden music, I wanted to go back to that kind of listening where I know it's a big ask. Like, I'm asking people to do that for 40 minutes, and we're inundated with demands every minute of our waking hour. So, not everybody will do that, but those who do, I think, will be rewarded by being led into this little strange world for 40 minutes. And the idea with reducing the lighting and lying down, and hopefully with headphones, is to both at the same time you're narrowing your focus, but you're widening your sensory income, your incoming sensory, what you're feeling, what you're listening. And you might not like everything you hear. You might go, God, I wish this thing would end. It's like driving me crazy. Or you go, oh, I really like this, And so I've told people it's okay if you fall asleep, which a good friend of mine did the first time I played it for him. We were lying down in this dark environment, and he fell asleep, and he woke up and goes, oh, and I go, it's okay, you don't have to like everything, but maybe I think every kind of music attracts an audience, no matter how weird or outside it is. And, so if you have an audience of a few hundred people, that's still great, because those few hundred people are really into it. And I'm hoping certainly that a component of the people that, or a percentage of the people that listen to this will feel that way. That they'll want to go back into that world and revisit it. And hopefully take something new from it every time.
And not fall asleep.
And not fall asleep, or maybe fall asleep.
So while this album's instrumental and conceptual, the album evokes strong, often melancholic or haunting feelings. How conscious were you of crafting emotional journey alongside the botanical one?
I think that was important to me. And I'm kind of a melancholic person anyway, by nature. And so probably that just comes out. But I felt that I wanted it to be very organic and very sensory, and a lot of it seems contemplative, and maybe there is a melancholy aspect to it. There certainly is with some of it, yeah. And again, I don't know whether that was just my personality coming out. I don't know that I was thinking, oh, this should be melancholic. But some of I should say that some of the plant names lent themselves to melancholic feelings, perhaps. Well, like Love Lies Bleeding, for sure. It sounds so tragic just by itself.
Yeah, the garden music reminds me of that song "Birdhouse in Your Soul" by They Might Be Giants. That was an interesting song, but that could be literally like part of that album. Anything dealing with plants. There's a lot of songs out there dealing with plants. It's incredible. But after crafting and creating one of Canada's most iconic pop songs, whoa, Echo Beach, like that was a great song. I love that one. What does it mean to you? What does it mean to you to release something as radically different and personal as garden music? Does it feel like revealing a hidden core of your artistry?
Well, I am, because most people don't know I ever did stuff like this. But just to go back to Echo Beach, there's a melancholic yearning feeling to that too. And it's manifested in a different way. Obviously, it's a pop song, but it does pull on the sense of loss, or the wanting to be back somewhere that had good feelings, and now you're not in a place with great feelings. And so there is an aspect of that in both garden music and Echo Beach, and in a lot of our songs. Right now, we've done one, and I'm just about to post a second. We put out a series of our songs on our YouTube channel called Happy Dystopia 2025, and it's all our darkest songs. And Martha and the Muffins have a lot of dark songs. I mean, people are familiar with the hits and stuff. And
what is the YouTube channel called again? What is it called again?
It's called Happy Dystopia 2025. And the first one came out, I don't know, in March. And we basically just compiled some of our most dark songs, because we're going, hey, is everybody having a great time this year?
Oh, yeah.
Look what's happening to the world. So to get your mood even blacker, listen to these songs. I mean, it's tongue in cheek, but we thought it was also an opportunity to kind of expose people that might have never heard some of these songs. And we got a good reaction with that one. And I'm just, as I said, about to post the second one, which is maybe even darker. That component of the band and of us has always been there. There's the radio thing, and then there's the album thing. And a critic once said, Martha and the Muffins really isn't a singles band, they're an album band. But that might be more of a closely held secret among certain listeners.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Mark. I don't really want to ask this, but I know that you probably won't respond. But what happened with Martha Ladley and Martha Johnson? What happened to the group? Why did they disperse?
Well, the band didn't disperse, but Martha Ladley left, in 80, and it's the circumstances of that leaving we've never talked about, because all I can say is that it was more about between myself and Martha Lavely. It wasn't between the two Marthas, but basically the fame of Echo Beach in 1980. I mean, it was a phenomenal year.
I love that.
But we had no manager. We were at the mercy of this woman at Dindis / Virgin, who was putting all this pressure on us to write another Echo Beach. And among the 6 original members of the band, it was like we were being divided up. I mean, I guess Andy Hawes, the original sax player, and myself were more on the experimental end of things. Even though I was writing pop songs, our sensibilities were more aligned with that. And then to varying degrees, everybody else was sort of further to the pop thing. And it affected the beautiful thing about the original band, but its downfall was that it was made up of very different personalities, and we all reacted to that fame, that sudden fame about being plucked out of Queen Street West and thrown into London without a manager, at the mercy of the British media, who both liked us and condescended to us, because it was still, back then it was still like, oh, Canadian band from the colonies. And you're going, hold on, wait a minute. We helped bail you out of 2 world wars, and it isn't a colony anymore, just, FYI. But, so you get this combination of curiosity and condescension, but it affected everybody differently. And it just didn't work out that Martha Lavely was going to be in the band any longer. So, but, and she went on to do her own thing, and we went on and when Carl Finkel left as bass, we ended up getting Jocelyn Landois through a series of completely random. And then she said, I've got a brother named Dan. Why don't we do our next demo at a studio in Hamilton? And we ended up doing 3 albums with Dan Landois, which would have never happened if that original band had stayed. So, it just goes on, the pressures on bands and artists are just crazy sometimes, especially if the record company goes, hey, we're making money off these people. You might not be making money, but we're making money. And, when we were doing the second album in England at the Manor, and Richard Branson would come up on the weekend with Carol Wilson, and they go, we don't hear another Echo Beach. And
wow.
You're not really going to hear another Echo Beach, because I'm from art college, and the idea of repeating stuff like that is not, in my wheelhouse. So, and I think by the 3rd album, they just kind of lost interest, which is why when Dan came on board, they said, well, we've never heard of this guy. And of course, it was well before he was famous as a producer. But, because you want to pick him, we've never heard of him, but we'll let you do the album, but we're going to give you 10 grand less for the budget, right? And we went, great, just leave us alone. And, that was the first album we did in Canada, and they were far away. They didn't bug us, and we did, for the first time, we did an album that we really wanted to do. And it sounded like what we really wanted to sound. And at the time, critics said they've either gone onto a way more interesting level, or they've blown their careers. Like, who knows what they've done here? Which I thought was interesting, because the minute you divide people, like when it's that divisive, you go, we must be doing something interesting if half the people think we failed and the other half think it's the best album we've ever done, so I think we're onto something.
Did your group ever cross paths with Jane Seabury from Mimi and the Beach? I think her song came out at the same time as Echo, didn't it? Or
I think it's a bit later, maybe a year or 2 later. We never played with her, but we ran into her lots of times at various events in Toronto.
That's awesome.
Every time I know Martha and I, when we used to go to more theater than we do now, we always used to run into Geddy Lee. I guess he was a fan of the theater too. So
wow.
You go, hey Geddy, what's going on? Oh, just checking out this play. And you've run into people, sort of more often back then, at least for us anyway. It seemed
Yeah.
more people were out and about somehow.
Yeah. There was actually there was I think it's called Bands Reunited. I think a show where they went and they tried to locate old 70s and 80s band members and try to bring them together to do one more show. And it was really difficult for Glenn
Oh,
Tilbrook and all the runs from Squeeze to get together. And the best one is the Score Brothers from Flock of Seagulls. They haven't played for years, and when they got them together to play one more show, they went, what happened? This is great. And they're doing it today. It's just
yeah.
you begin to miss it, right? And you start getting into things like that. And
For some bands, yeah. Like I think, I mean, our original band would never get together. It would never. I mean, it just wouldn't work. But the Dance Part era band, which was fabulous, there'd be, if it were possible, that would have been a great band to get together. And I should mention, just because I thought of it now, one of our next Martha and the Muffins releases is going to be a 1983 recording live at Ontario Place, recorded by Dan Lanois. That
really
sat
nice.
in the closet for since '83. And I think that's the next thing we're going to release. And it is phenomenal. Like, I have to say, that band was crazy in a really good way.
Wow, that's awesome. Do you hope
Expanded.
that, yeah. Do you hope that your garden music album, which is offering solace, do you think, like, what ways do you hope that will provide refuge for different perspective for listeners navigating a noisy world?
Well, as I said, I'm inviting people to go leave that noisy world and come into my noisy world for a while. And it's some of the noises are pleasant and beautiful, and others are disturbing. But one analogy I give about all of this is that imagine you became 1 inch tall and were dumped in a garden. Like, it would be both phenomenal and terrifying at the same time, because you'd be looking at all these ferns that were 10 stories high, but at any given moment a spider could leap out and eat you. So in a way,
Yeah.
So you're going through these cuts on garden music, and you're going, oh, this is really, baby's breath is really interesting, and it's, making me feel sleepy. And then, you go into, I can't remember what follows it, but, you're kind of going into something else. And it's kind of that I thought of that well after I'd finished the project. I go, yeah, this is like being in the garden, only really small. And some of it's great, and some of it's going, whoa, I don't know about this.
Yeah. Do you think completing and releasing garden music unlocks a new pathway for your solo work? Like, are there any other gardens and conceptual spaces you feel compelled to explore sonically now that this one has bloomed?
Well, it's encouraged me to think about a garden music volume 2, because I've got lots of sounds still, and I have probably another 10 common plant names that were just as good as what appeared on this, but you have to make choices, right? But I could go that way, but I've also got a project that's more like a conventional song structured album called Beautiful Vaughn, which is more like a narrative about a kind of a doomed love affair that the backdrop, it happens against the backdrop of kind of a ruined landscape, which is like a metaphor for the relationship. And the ruined landscape is sort of the outer suburbs, where it's all hydro towers and malls and highways and kind of this dispiriting environment, and they're trying to navigate their way through that. And this is another one that's been, worked on and off for 15 years, not 25 years, but 15 years.
Awesome.
And so one of those, a new garden, another garden music, but I think I might go for the Beautiful Vaughn one first. I feel like I got to get that off my shoulders.
Yeah. You got quite an eclectic musical taste, my friend. Martha and the Muffins, and then garden music. The final closer question I'd like to ask you, No, it's not about what do you think AI in music. Everyone's that sort of exhausted that question. If someone walked up to you and said, "I like what you do. I want to do exactly what you do. I want to be an artist. I want to be a musician. I want to do music like you." What is one piece of advice you give them?
I know it's really challenging for younger people because they don't have the experience to be, often anyway, the experience to be confident about what they're doing. And that comes with doing it, it comes from creating it, it comes from the experience of it. But I often have conversations with people that are kind of starting an artistic enterprise, or maybe they do it for fun, and they so often they go, "Oh, but I'm not very good, or I don't really know what I'm doing." I go,
That's true.
"Stop right there," because that's the first barrier you got to get
Mhm.
over. Get over the barrier that you're not good at something. Look at 3 and 4 year olds. They are fearless. You know, like my granddaughter sits down to make a drawing. She's not going, "Oh, I don't think this is very good." She's all over it, right?
Yeah.
She's all over it. And for that reason, kids art is fantastic, right? And so I think one thing we have to do, we don't want to go back to being children, but we want to go and try and shed all the inhibitions that adulthood and adolescence have put on us. Like, you know, you go to school, and some kid goes, "Oh, you're stupid," or "I don't like
Yeah.
the way you're dressed," or "I don't like the way you're drawing," and all of a sudden, like, blah, blah, blah. And so you have to shed all that. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, to find that deep part of you that doesn't react to that negative stuff. You have to shed that. It's a process, like it doesn't happen overnight. And to find, and one of the things that helps is finding a mentor or a teacher that can help you examine those
Mhm.
feelings, and the better feelings that come from creating things that you can gradually see some sort of confidence in, you know, and I think for that reason, art college was fantastic. You know, you were allowed to make mistakes, you were allowed to do stupid stuff, and nobody was going, "Oh, is that ever bad?" You know, your instructors would go, "Okay, try this, you know, maybe if you're finding a roadblock, try going around it this way." And I think that's very valuable too.
Yeah, they're very talented people out there, musicians, artists, you name it. It's just incredible what they can do with something that they give, it's like amazing. Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate you being on the podcast. Every Mark Gain from Martha and the Muffins, everything will be linked down below. Special link to his garden music. Great, great, great album. Thank you so much for coming up with it, and great time to release it. And yeah, I'm gonna hope that everyone else can listen to that in the dark, lying down. I hope they don't fall asleep. Don't fall asleep, everyone. Have coffee before you listen to it. Awesome, man.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for the conversation, Chris. I really enjoyed your questions. They were, they made me think a lot about, maybe too hard. I'm going, "Oh God, I've never thought of that."
Yeah, I
But
know, eh?
yeah,
I
they
got,
were good. So thank you for that.
you're very welcome, and I got a title for your next album, "Sounds of the Chrysanthemum."
Say that again.
Sounds of the Chrysanthemum.
Oh, Sons of the Chrysanthemum. Okay, I'm going to write that down because who knows, right?
And how
Sounds of
about
the
this one?
Chrysanthemum.
And you have to release it in May. Last 2 weeks in May. It called "The Music of the Lilacs."
All right. This sounds like, oh my God, it's a whole other.
Well, contact me if you want to do a collaboration. I've always wanted to work with you.
Well, there's some titles to work on.
Mhm. Awesome, man. Thank you so much for this interview. Really appreciate it. And maybe we can do another one sometime.
Yeah, there'll be more stuff down the pipeline, so I look forward to the next time we talk.
Looking forward to it. Yeah, let me know. I love it. Thank you so much,
Okay.
man. Okay, we're
All
going to
right.
end the
Take
stream,
care.
everyone. Bye, everyone.